Hello, everyone. Welcome to All In on Real Estate. I'm your host, Aaron Goins. I started this meetup because when I was in the military, no one in my circle was talking about real estate. A lot of time we talked about other things, but nothing about real estate. And I want to start a real estate meetup that talks about real estate so people can learn how to do generational wealth for them and their families. So I'm very, very excited for my guest speaker today. She is special to this meetup because she is my first repeat guest speaker. Miss Tamara Jones. How you doing, Tamara?
Yes, I'm so excited to be back, Aaron. It's so many things that have developed on both of our sides since the last time we talked, and so I'm excited to have the invite back. And I love this meetup because it just feels like a close-knit group of friends, sharing good information.
Right, right. Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm very, very excited to get into the new project you're doing on. So, but let's start right now with something I always ask because not everybody knows. So let's start. What is your origin story?
Well, I'll tell you that it's just so you know a little bit about me. Again, my name is Tamara Jones, and you call me TJ for short. And I've been in the short-term rental real estate game since 2015. So I started off with a room back in 2015, and now we have approximately 19 units across the US. Those are all in different cities, and then I have 3 over in the Dominican Republic after kind of going to separate ways from a property management company that I was working with there, which I had many that we were managing, but we've decided to be a little bit more independent and actually pick up 3 units of our own. And they keep us pretty busy over there. But I'll tell you, that's where I started, was just a room. I was just like anybody else looking for, I heard this thing called Airbnb. And also I had heard of couch surfing back then as well. And I was looking at, I had a pretty big house in a place called Dunwoody, Georgia. And I was looking at supplementing. At the time I was a paralegal for the federal government. And so I was looking at supplementing my income because we all know government employees not like racking it up or anything like that. But it did really well. That's all I could say, is that it surpassed my expectations because it started paying my mortgage. So just imagine one room in your house paying your entire mortgage. And so from that point on, I expanded horizons, which was to get my own individual separate unit from where I was living. And I ran into like mentors and police because I was looking for that. I was looking for, how do I do this? So who do I need to talk to? And so one in particular just kind of gave me a chance to really work for his company. I went from just kind of getting mentorship to just working for his company. And there's where I learned, because I think I touched at eventually, because I think that went on for about close to 3 years. I touched everything that has to do with short-term rental, everything, setups, zone checks, permitting applications, anything you think of, hiring of the contractors. I mean, at one point, I think I was had hands in everything that had to do with short-term rental, and on a big scale because they had a pretty huge inventory.
So, not to go really deep into it because we went over your story beforehand, but what was some of the lessons learned when you first got on your own and start doing short-term rentals away from when you was under somebody?
Well, one of the biggest things I'll tell you is that it's not easy. The risk to carry isn't easy. When you're doing it by yourself, or you start to try to pinpoint properties, how many of us think about, I don't want to get this wrong. I don't want to pick the wrong property. I don't even know what to look for. And back then, I see Fred up here, there was no clubhouse. There was no clubhouse or anything. There really wasn't a whole lot on YouTube when I talk about when I started about it. And to go out on your own and get something that you need to make sure that it's breaking even at least, and you're not sure exactly how to pick that particular real estate asset because it still was pretty new back then, that was pretty scary, especially depending on how risk averse you are. And I'm not a very huge, I'm risk a risk taker, but I don't have a huge curve for risk. I like to have my risk. That's Siri. That's my Alexa, so ignore her.
Wow. Okay. All right. That's how advanced you are, huh? You got Siri just doing
That's
talking for you, huh?
Alexa. Anyway, she's rattling, but that was the deal, was not wanting to make a mistake that was going to cost me a whole lot of money. And that happened anyway. I mean, down the road, it didn't happen immediately, but you don't know what you don't know. Sometimes you don't even know what you're supposed to ask. So, so that happened anyway. I lost some money, with a unit here in Atlanta that I had family come in with me. Family wouldn't talk to me. Had that happen, and I also lost the unit that I put flip type of money into in Clearwater, Florida, because of the location. It was a total gut job, and I had to really, it was a commercial lease. We had to really flip the unit, from a salon to a short-term rental, because it was in a mixed zone. You could have both. You can have somewhere to live, you can have somewhere to work, didn't matter. And lost that unit almost immediately when COVID hit. I mean, that was a lot of money. That was the first time really taking on a rental from the studs and building it out with the hopes that, because we had a really long contract, really long. When I say long, it was about 8 years, 8-year contract on it. And that money just went down the drain.
Okay. Well, if you guys want to see more of her talking about her story, go to the first episode that was in January 2021. So let's move forward to recently.
Yes.
What is new with you?
Well, what's new is that we have, as a company, well, let's talk about that. I have a company now that is totally different. It's called Bucket List Stays. So founded Bucket List Stays back in January with a small team of folks. They will show up. I know they're late, but I got some folks that'll come on. And we started that as a way to display and to keep assets separately for guests, meaning that the whole purpose of that company is to showcase the units themselves. So if you go onto our social media and things like that, you see these units. Now, what are the units and what's the premise of the company? The company is based on the Great Resignation. Basically, the whole sentiment of travelers during and after COVID was that, hey, life is short. We got to travel. We want to see as much as we can out here. We want options like try before you buy it, with tiny houses, RVs, and things like that, because we're looking at living simpler. We're looking at living on the move. We're looking at being a digital nomad. So the company that we established, took that whole premise, and that is the type of units that we are trying to turn out. The first one that we turned out, which is new, is our tiny house, the Relentless Raven, which is now positioned right outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico, on a 30-acre glamping site that's also, it's like a historic artifact site as well. It has so many, facets to where it's at. That's beautiful, the way that it matched up with that tiny house. And not only it being a tiny house is what makes it unique, it's themed after Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. So everything, when you go in, everything that you touch has something to do with that poem. And we also have a escape room built into it that's under construction, because we're adding video to the clues. So we're trying to advance what we started off with that particular unit. And I'll tell you, Aaron, I could talk forever if you gotta, go, and I'll tell them what the biggest thing we learned from it was that location still matters. So if anybody ever thought that, hey, and I think I talked to Fred about this too, if anybody ever thought that, hey, can I have this or that and people still come? Yes, they will, but it takes a lot longer. So when you're not in those major metro areas, or you're not showing up really strong on AirDNA or Data Rabu, then you take a risk of time is becomes a factor. So, because you have to build that audience and you have to be dependent on your marketing and the OTA's marketing to people that are looking specifically for those type of experiences and those type of units.
Well, you can continue. You can continue
Yeah.
saying. Go ahead, please.
So I'll tell you, and this is just a good time for you. I know you got to step away for a moment. This is a good time. I'm going to tell y'all, I'm going to talk Marcus and Fred's head off. Do y'all mind if I tell you the story about the Raven and the mistakes it made, but now the calendar is completely booked for the next 90 days? You mind if I tell you that story?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm
All right.
at swim practice.
All right. All right, so we got this, the tiny house, and a lot of lessons came with that. And the first lesson was be very careful about taking something like a real estate asset that's built somewhere else and matching it to a separate type of land, meaning that it wasn't built on the land or wasn't built in the place that you're going to have it at. And that's the case with the tiny house. We had it manufactured and actually came from Michigan. And it traveled all the way to a tiny house community that we found outside of the Rio Grande. So we found it and we thought it was going to be wonderful. We found it. But the first things that we learned was you have to be very clear on the way that has to hook up. Number one, you might say that's obvious, but it's not always obvious, on what sides are hookups and what types of hookups, and is there any quirks to that particular hookup? So you have to get really clear on that, and whether that infrastructure that you're bringing it to supports what you're trying to plug into that grid. So that was one of the first lessons that we learned was, making sure that you're clear on that. Another lesson that we learned with that tiny house was that you have to make sure that you survey the land from the eyes of a guest. So that didn't happen. We had been used to acquiring arbitrage units with just video, a runner and some video. And so with this particular issue or this particular project, that didn't work. And it didn't work because the trip up to the tiny house village was not good. It was not good, not a great, it had been an old trailer park before it had been retitled Tiny House Village. And it just wasn't ideal for, for a place to park in. And mind you, this is a rental. It's not like we're buying it. This is a rental, okay? Rental of this arbitrage in the land instead of the unit. So that was the next place we went wrong with that. Even though it gained traction pretty quickly because of what it was, and it was near Albuquerque, which is just about, was about 45 minutes away. It gained a lot of traction. People did not appreciate that drive up, and neither did I, when I did it as well. So we had to pay attention to that. So that was the thing, is that the bottom line is part of our business model when we started Bucket List Stays was that all the unique stays had to be mobile. And boy, did we call that right. It was so great that that tiny house was on wheels. So it was purchased under the business model, which says everything must be mobile. And we were able to move it to this beautiful, I couldn't have asked for a better site, this beautiful glamping site right outside of New Mexico. And now we get the traffic for both, outside of Santa Fe. Now we get the traffic for Santa Fe and we get the traffic for Albuquerque. People travel from both to come see this tiny house that has great reviews. It's already had an article written about it, and it's also been asked to be featured on different like Instagram sites and stuff like that specialize in tiny houses. But it definitely was, that move was not easy, especially after having just moved to the Rio Grande, all the way from Michigan, having to again identify somewhere. But we had to do it. We had to fail quickly and get out of there. And now it's nothing but success with that tiny house. And I see it blowing up even more, honestly.
So could you talk about how you started in 2015 and now it's now, but you have the ability to be free and do what you want, and
Yeah,
how the benefits of it, the benefits of hard work put in.
I love that question because that is so important to me. And I'm gonna just say I love that question because, and that's kind of why I came off of Clubhouse, because it was so much about all the money, the money, the money, right? But for me, it was never about the money. It was about being able to be the gatekeeper of my calendar, to be able to make enough money, but it be passive. And I've seen a lot of people say it's not passive. It absolutely is if you set it up right. So if you set up this, you have to do a lot of work up front. So if they're talking about it's not passive and that you have to do work, yes, you have to do work, but it's up front. So when you walk away from that, the period of time where you went through all the analysis and going through all the setup and all of that, you should have something that's pretty much running quietly in the background. And I call units that don't run quietly chatty units. Like I was managing somebody's 2 units and they were chatty because of the way they were set up. And that's another reason why I won't take on under management. I won't take anything on unless we've set it up. But the point is, back to what you were saying, is how do you live free? That is why I'm still in this short-term rental game, is because it allows me to go and do whatever I want, whenever I want, as far as my calendar is concerned. I'm not tied to a W-2 job. I'm not tied to anything that requires me to be right in front of it, working it, and a short-term rental is that for me. The only times that I have heightened alert, because we do have co-hosts as well, but anytime I have heightened alert is on check-in days and check-out days. I'm always making myself available on Fridays and Sundays for any issues that might come up. But many times we have doors open and closing, and I don't say anything to anybody. Nobody says anything. Our automated system takes care of it. Our co-hosts keep an eye on specific questions. But the process of getting in and out of these units is all set up automatically. Everything, the locks, the instructions, the information that's posted inside is made for somebody to come in and come out without having any type of, I call it interruption by a host.
I love that. I love that. So, okay. So when I first, met you and started talking to you and things like that, you made trips to Jacksonville from Atlanta. And I'll be like, oh, this and that, and I'll be like, and then I'll just talk to you and you'll be, hey, well, I'm gonna take this Airbnb, I'll be there for a night or something like that. And then, so not to get too personal about it, but because it's freedom, could you talk about some of the places you've been to? If you like.
Yeah, I do. So let's just talk about where is the process of, getting a short-term rental. I call it the sourcing phase, the scouting when you go out there. And that's something I learned big time from the company I was working with before going independent. But part of it is part of this business, I like to go see the unit, if I have some lined up and we've gotten a positive hit back from owners that says they're looking at allowing us to arbitrage that space or to use that space as a short-term rental, I love to go and narrow those spaces down myself. And a lot of times that does end up with something I can write off as well. This is a part of the business, And so a lot of that, those opportunities allow me to do that. And I think that when we met, I was narrowing down one right there outside of Jacksonville, because Jacksonville's very restricted, the city, Jacksonville. But yeah, and that unit is doing, I have not even been back. So me and you talked about when was I going back? And I was like, well, I love to give units 90 days to get up and going and get as many reviews as possible. I won't even take a long-term stay during the first 90 days because of that. But anyway, that's another conversation. But I haven't been back because that unit has been booked back to back. It is a great market. It's a great thing when you find those type of markets. But back to traveling, yeah, I use this to travel. And not only that, it allows anyone in this business to secure units that you may not have ever thought about if you're doing this business right, meaning that I'm not tied to a W-2. I can take off and I can negotiate units and I can go and fly here and there. That opened the door for Dominican Republic. That opened the door for somebody who got in contact with me. The culture over there is very face-to-face. It's very personable. And over 6 months or so, we worked out, these are the contract deals, but it all ended up in a trip. The whole time, it ended up with us making a plan to come and see the buildings, their the plan development they had. And I took, I think that trip was about 3 days of back and forth between the east and the west side of that country. You know, and that's all because I'm allowed to do that because I have passive income coming in for air, you know, from my short-term rentals. And that's what is attractive. And I hear people say it's not passive. Why isn't it? You know, it absolutely can be passive depending on how you set it up.
I think that I love what you're doing. You know, I think a lot of people want to get there, and I think that you emphasizing how you know, freedom is more important than money.
For me,
And,
it is.
yeah, and money doesn't always result into freedom.
Mm-mm.
I think a lot of
No,
people
it
got to
doesn't.
understand that and learn that is that money's not freedom.
That's right.
You can have a lot of money, but your job takes over you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or your business is your job. So, you know, you don't have that freedom because you always got to be in your business. So
That's right. No,
yeah.
I just want to reiterate that. Like I was hearing a little bit too much group talk about, you know, all this wealth, and all this wealth is your freedom. You know, wealth is still to tell people I'll take this project, I'll take that, and I won't, and still be able to pay all my bills, you know, every month. That is for me a part of wealth, you know, is a big part of it. It's me calling the shots. You know, I even call the shots right now with projects. If it's a project that doesn't pay out the equivalent for what we're putting in, I turn that project down. I've gotten to where I don't even take all projects. That's my sis on there. Came on. Hi, RB. I'm glad you can make it. But I turn down projects now because all of us have capacity. We all have a certain capacity, and we all should pay attention to that capacity. And now, since I am very clear on our team's capacity, because I work with a team's capacity, we have to pick and choose the projects that have the most bang for our buck.
Okay. So where do you want to see, you know, your business go towards?
Yeah. I think I was kind of talking about that earlier in RB's room on Clubhouse, just stopping by because there's such great conversations. But you know what? I'm gonna be honest. Recently, I've looked at too, because I got into marketing. You know, like really got into it. Not about just making my pages look good and things like that, but what is actual marketing that pays back, like it pays on investment. And what I would like to see is that we hire, and that's what we're doing now. We're looking into, and yes, they cost. I mean, they really do cost. You have to sacrifice. But when it's a company in front of you that's telling you that they can take your company to performing 30% better than what it is, that's on guarantee. They're saying it'll do better, but on guarantee for the contract, 30% increase in occupancy across the board. That is where we're looking at now. How do we get really legitimate, and how do we get to where that increases from bookings is coming direct? How do we, you know, outdo what the OTAs are doing for us so we're not so dependent on them, right? And so that's what we're doing now with it's a marketing company I'm really wanting to go ahead and give the green light to, because they've gotten to know our business model and they put down these key performance indicators. And part of it was already starting to get just our likes up. We're up to, you know, 100 likes, and those things didn't happen. That's very intentional. You have to make that intentional with the goal of, you know, gaining leads that will convert into sales. That is what we talk about in these marketing meetings. How are we increasing our sales? And so that is what I would like to go towards in this next year, specifically in 2023. And honestly, in 5 years, Aaron, I would like to sell my company. I want to give it 5 years of hard work, build the inventory out, and our inventory looking like mostly unique stays. That's what we're working on now, more unique stays, and then be able to sell that company in about 5 years. I would like to see that come pass.
So let me guess. Do you want to be a consultant after that, after those 5 years?
No.
Okay. I guess we'll talk about that
Nope.
offline then.
Yep, nope. And the thing is, and I had to think about it even back when I was thinking about a course of that, it's not built in me. I love my freedom. I love being able to come and go. I have very little on my calendar, but what I have on my calendar pays out big. And so that's what I'm looking at is once I get this company, to a point where it pays out big, to maybe start another company. I kind of like that whole, I love that, turning something into nothing. I love that.
Right. How is it for you having partnerships?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll tell you that partnerships are iffy. And the reason I say partnerships are iffy is because you have to be sure of what it is that both parties or multiple parties are bringing to the table that'll be equally beneficial. And that has to be determined up front. Okay, that's number one. Number two is you also have to look at exiting, just like you look at a real estate asset. And when you're buying it, what's my exit plan if this or that? Same thing with partnerships. And so what we've learned is that, yeah, partnerships are good to have, but they are good to have if you have all of those things very clear. Partnerships are great, but you must have clarity, and I would say clarity in writing on what that partnership is, what each component brings to the table, and then what is it that the expectation of them getting out of it, and also what is that exit plan for when it's time to dissolve whatever you're working on. As long as those things are clear, I think partnerships are great.
Okay. So where do you see anything happening with short-term rentals as far as the industry changing, any like that, from your experience?
Yeah, and the thing is, and I could talk all day about short-term rentals because I work it all day and I won't back away from that's my truth. If what I see is a change in landscape. It is so competitive right now. You used to be able to, and I promise you, I've lived through this. You used to be able to take your unit. This is kind of how we set up anyway. We like to start setup on Monday. Start that setup on Monday. Make sure the listing is up by that Wednesday with the initial pictures. Make sure your dummy listing is up. And we would have our first guest walking in on that Friday, no brainer. That is how it always would be. Or if you were lucky to have renderings done, which is just, faux pictures put up on your listing, we would already have our first couple of bookings, months out, right? Especially during those peak seasons. That is no longer the case. It is maybe in some markets. And if you've had units that are already out there and been performing over a year or two, yes, you're going to see great performance. But if you are new right now coming into the short-term rental game, there are two things that you have to pay attention to if you want to survive. Number one is zoning. Number one is legislation. Are you getting into somewhere where you're going to tank your own business or your own profits because you're not paying attention to legislation? That's number one. And then, of course, number two is what I'm saying is competition, because there is a lot of what I'm seeing out right now that I call bad competition. And you might say, TJ, what's bad competition? That's ignorant competition, meaning that they have no idea how to play the short-term rental game. So you pull up analysis that says demand coming to this area should get you about $72,000 a year. But then when you dig in on another analysis report saying that these units in this same area is only pulling 20–30% occupancy, or they only pulling this, $60 a night. Where is the disparity? And where it is people not understanding how to operate it as a business. They're looking at, hey, yeah, this report says I can be priced at $180 a night, and I see my competitors priced at $180 a night, but I want to make sure I'm 100% booked. So I'm going to price myself at $90 a night. And does it do it? Absolutely, we'll get them booked 100%. But guess what it does? It brings down the market, even though there's nothing wrong with that market. You should be making more money in that market. And I'm seeing that so much more these days, specifically in the metro areas, those hot areas. Houston, I'm not going to say Atlanta's there yet, but those bigger areas, you definitely are getting impacted by anybody who has a phone and access to a space, but it has no knowledge of business.
Have you thought about having a theme Airbnb?
That's what we have now. So we have themes. All of our Airbnbs have themes. So we have, and it's what you think of as a theme, we might not call it a theme, but a theme for us is anything that tells a story. So if you go to Bucket List Stays, my website talks about how our units have a story, because guess what our process is? Early, and I'm giving all my secrets, early in the process, before we even do the setup, we write a story. The Raven has a whole written story behind it. Everything inside of it means something. And we let people figure that out with the escape room and things like that. But the purpose of it is that, yes, there's a theme based on the story of that unit. And all of them have it. The one in New Orleans is based on a Creole slave. That house was passed down to the owner by ancestry out of the slave owners, passing to their slaves a home. And that was one of them. And we play that up. It almost is like a museum when you walk in it.
Okay. Well, I love that. I mean, I think that's so important because it gravitates people. When you have a story, intriguing story is really going to make people want to gravitate towards something. So
yeah, some people that come looking just for it. The one at the Monarch, the recent one we stood up right before Pandora, it has a whole monarch habitat in the backyard that we're trying to get certified. People come to see that. They literally come and say, we're trying to help with your habitat, or we read that in your listing. So yeah, we have themes.
Right. Okay. So before I open up for questions, what would you want to tell somebody who is I want to say, you just said before, like somebody starting off, but somebody who may be in a pinch as far as just having problems. They're excited, they got into it, maybe have some early success, but now they're in a pinch or they're just trying to figure it out. What would you say to them? Advice you would give to them?
Well, I would have to know about what the pinch is exactly, around and about. So can you give me an example? Because there can be different places in this process that'll stall you. So what do you think would be an example of a pinch?
Well, they had like 2 or 3 Airbnbs, and when they first started, they were having some great success. And now the booking is like you said, it's competitive where they at, but now the booking has gone way down.
Yeah.
How can he rebound? What
I
would
love
your
this
advice be to them?
question. I'm gonna tell you why I love this question. It's almost like you set it up for me to say what I'm gonna say, because I've been wanting to say this somewhere, but I haven't found like where I'm gonna say this at. It is so important to look at short-term rentals, not from a month-to-month basis, because I just ran into this with one of my investors. They're looking at like, oh, it's not doing this. We're in low season, by the way, some places, because all markets aren't the same, but we're in low season. But this is the deal. When you're dealing with a short-term rental, you must look at it from a yearly perspective, because you simply can have a season that pays your expenses for the whole year, and that is the truth. When you look at your particular unit and you're saying, okay, gosh, my sales are down, this and that. Some of that you have to factor in because short-term rentals, unlike other real estate assets, are very seasonally impacted, which makes them volatile. But that's also why they return a lot. But you have to look at where do they return at. Look at it from a whole year perspective. I can't tell you if I judged, just now for Tybee, Island right there on the beach. If I judged Tybee Island on what performance it had based off of October, I wouldn't have never stepped in that unit. But once the spring comes around, you can pay your expenses by that season by itself for that unit, all the entire year season's expenses from a spring. So that's what you have to look at. I think I see a lot of people now, and that's also why I'm really starting to make sure I understand our investor profile. I'm seeing a lot of people now wanting some type of instant gratification, specifically from short-term rental, because it kind of had that start, which anything new to the market will have that kind of start. But you don't need to look at it like that. You need to look at it like any other type of investment. So y'all that deal with the stock market, you know that you put in some stocks, even if they're aggressive, you're looking for your candlesticks to go up and down because they're going to go up and down because you have to sit in it for a moment, right? Just talking about that, but you're looking for it to steadily tick up. It's no different, with short-term rentals. And specifically, we're seeing that more and more now because it's such steep competition. So don't say that, your unit's not doing well. If you've sat through a season and you know that it's going to pick up, and it should pick up to the point where you're paying yourself back for anything that you did not break even with in the months before. And I hope that makes sense.
It does. It does. All right. Well, Tamara, it's been great. It's been great talking to you. Once again, like I said, I'm really honored for you being my first repeat guest speaker. So I'm going to open up for questions. Already seen Brendan already asked a question. He said, what percent of your advertising or sales is caused by a story?
Yes, so that's what we're gathering now. I love that question, Brandon. The reason why is because that's exactly why we're bringing in a marketing company, that this is their baby. And they're going to collect for us, what is it that is our keys to, utilizing the best occupancy possible. Part of that is the theming. So it's not that I could tell you, it's that you need to have a way to collect that, because now we have on our direct booking site, thanks to the consulting by the marketing company, is we have to ask them about how they were directed to our site. And part of that is the question about, did a theme attract you and things like that. So not to give you a percentage because I don't have it, but to reiterate, the question you're asking is absolutely relevant, and what we're doing now, and that falls directly in the laps of our marketing company.
Is there something to do in order to, I guess, boost occupancy when you're having the down season?
Yeah, you have to, and I'll tell you, it's a couple of things you can do, okay? Now, of course, we always talk about, lowering the prices, but that by itself isn't always the answer to it. I would say part of the answer also is just to make sure that you go back through your filters, because I keep talking about it's a simple thing, but people overlook it. And especially Airbnb does something where they change your filters or they drop them off. Like they'll do something where they'll drop filters. Go back and make sure you have every filter that you meet clicked on that, because what you're trying to do in those low seasons is you're trying to get yourself from page 3, 4, and 5 to the front page. How do you do that? Is making sure that you click in as many of those filters as possible. If it says, and it does have this, that you need to have a tea kettle, not to say you need to have one, but it has a checkbox for tea kettle and you don't have one, go buy a tea kettle. So you want to go ahead and take that time out to make sure you're clicking as many filters as possible to get yourself on the first page so that people are not scrolling to get to you. Another thing is, and I harp on this as well, people aren't listed on as many sites as they should, because they maybe think they can't handle it, but you really do need to be listed on at least one insurance site and maybe Furnish Finder to add to that. So as example, you need to be listed on Airbnb, Vrbo, and Booking.com, the minimum. But then I also would look at how can I monopolize PureSpace, how can I monopolize ALE, which is an insurance website where you can list for insurance companies and things like that to bring in your bookings during those lull periods.
Do you utilize pricing strategies in order to be able to increase occupancy?
Yeah, that's lowering your prices. That's what I said. It works. You can, but just think that everybody is doing that. Everybody with an optimizer, at some point, everybody with a pricing optimizer. And when I mean that, I mean like Price Labs, Beyond Pricing, and things like that. They're all doing a price strategy because they're looking at demand. So you have to look beyond that and say, how can I do more? Because I need, to at least I would like to at least break even in these units, even though sometimes it's not possible. But, and how you do more is those things, direct advertisements. Again, I can't stress how important it was. I don't think we did it enough in the beginning to go after direct bookings and to make sure that if you're on those OTAs that you're offering as much as possible to get you on that first page.
Next question for TJ. I got a question for TJ or Tamara.
Do you offer services to support people that might be having some difficulty with the productivity of their units?
Yeah, I'll tell you, RB, and I'll tell you this, but just because how you got to know who you are and where your strengths are. My strength has never been coaching or anything like that because I'm always out in the field. That's what I call it. I'm always out in the field actually working on something that has to do with short-term rental. So the only thing that we offer as far as services are concerned is we offer turnkey Airbnbs. That's for people that are not looking to do anything with their short-term rentals and things like that. And Aaron asked me this earlier, are you maybe one day thinking about consulting? And I said no, but maybe you never know, one day I may sit down and consult, but there is so much that's changing out on the landscape. I'm almost shy away from anybody coming to me for any type of answer because I feel like I'm always learning. I'm always out here learning every day on what works and what doesn't work. And so I share that when I can, and I'm on platforms like yours and on platforms like this, but I've never been someone who would sit still enough on their calendar to do one-on-one consulting or anything like that. Just know that I'm in the fight with you guys.
How about a masterclass? Are you thinking of possibly doing some sort of ninja situation?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I love RB, so I love her. Yeah, one day, and this is the truth about it, and this is for anybody that's here. You really don't get far, in any type of industry unless at some point you start turning out value with learning tools. Like how can people learn, about what it is you're doing and things like that. And we're looking at how longevity in any industry, that's where it's at, really, getting the classes out, getting how people can start and things like that. So eventually, yes, because I know it needs to be done. Like I know it needs to be done, but what do I want to do that in? It's not just short-term rentals. I would love to do or conquer it from a unique stays perspective. How do you start and be successful with unique stays? And you can see I'm at the beginning phases of that.
I think you'll be a great person to be a consultant or a coach. I think that if you like you said, if you slow down a little bit, I think that when you get people one-on-one time, you're a very great communicator. So I think that you'll be a great, effective coach. I think you have the patience as well. Being a mom helps out a lot. So
yes, it does. Yeah, it does.
So I think you'll be a great coach if you go that route. What's up, Desmond? You got a question? I see you on here on and off on the camera.
Yeah, I was driving and listening, and because I had a meeting, and then I heard the short-term rental. Question. Thanks for the presentation again.
No worries.
When there's an off season, do you have certain properties that would be, let's say, seasonal during the off season, as opposed to the short term during the I guess peak season? So if there's like more of a month to month rentals or a season.
Well, are you asking me, Desmond, is there units that perform outside of there being a seasonal factor? Or are you asking me, do we change our business model, how we're targeting guests as far as the length of stays during that time? I hear one or two of those.
Yeah, certain properties, certain areas you were saying that may not do good during the
Yes,
certain parts of the season. So like the Hamptons, to say,
yes,
the Hamptons, I know sometimes rents out 2, 3 months at a time.
yes.
But then probably in December or something, you probably get a week or nights.
Right.
So
No,
that's
I
all.
love that. I love that. Yeah, being able to adjust. Well, it's this one thing. First, I wanted to say that's a great question because it's this one thing I think people don't know as well, especially if you're dealing with like Airbnb. I'm always digging into how they operate because it's so important to a lot of hosts. And they have this algorithm response to midterm rentals, meaning that if you rent and your house is off the market, you're not on this showing on a search for about 3 weeks. Let's just say 3 weeks, because it's always somewhere around 3 weeks to a month. They actually drop you. They say they're wanting to support, these midterm rentals, but actually what I'm seeing, by studying their algorithm, because I think it's important to understand it, is that they actually drop you in ranking if you're off the market for a little while for a midterm rental. So you start to say, okay, how can I do that effectively and get back in the game once that guest is checked out? And that's when I go back to really making sure that your listing is spread out and connected to a channel manager. Some people use channel manager as like optional, like they don't. And when I mention channel manager, what that is that's really the heartbeat of your operations. If you're running multiple units on multiple platforms so that you don't have calendar conflicts and you have these automated systems. Now, so going back to your question, it's so important that even if you're running during those slow times, midterm stays, that you have at least one or two other platforms that's not looking at you as a, more set up as a midterm stay. They're still got their bookings, and your channel manager is just blocking those days off as they get booked. And so that platform doesn't know the difference. I don't know if you understood what I said, but because I was a little all over the place with the answer. But yeah, it's very important. And I got that question like on a back channel, somebody was saying, hey, I'm getting midterm bookings, but I'm having a hard time coming out of that. Once they leave, it's like I get nothing. And that's because the OTAs right now doesn't support that mixture,
Okay. Got it.
Great question.
Brendan asks, what do all good stories have in common?
Well, I'll say that I'm going to tell you what we go for. When we write a story about a unit, we go for feels. We go for how is it going to make that person feel? And you'll get a sense of that by a lot of times the reviews, the feel of when somebody walks in. And that's even with any kind of great decor, which I'll tell you a little insight is I just applied to go back to SCAD, which is Savannah College of Art and Design, because I'm really wanting to take this to another level with the whole storytelling and things like that. But what you're looking for is somebody to not forget the feeling about it. So they know about the story. You've given them a tidbit about the story. They walk in, they're seeing things in the home that speaks to the story. And then if you're really wanting to tie it all in like we do, we have either, for the tiny house, it's electronic, but we have in the ones in New Orleans, a little book that actually tells the story. And you have people that never forget that. They don't forget the feeling of what they felt when they read the story about the slave, and looking at some of the old books that are related to that time and things like that. So you're really trying to immerse them. That's why I'm really wanting to go back to school and study even stage design, like theater design, things like that, because we're trying to elicit a certain feeling out of them that will remind them of that unit, you know, so they'd never forget it. So the name of it, number one, giving it a name that they can't remember, which one of them is called a Creole Cottage, the other one's the Crescent. But giving them a short name that they don't remember, giving them a story that they read and they don't forget, you know, how they felt when they read that. So it's really that for us. How do you get people to pay? How do you get people to want to pay for a story, want to pay to come experience your unit? That's what I'm trying to get our company to. Not how well we can, you know, house their 10 children or whatever. We're trying to pivot into the space of somebody who wants to immerse themselves into an experience, and they want to be able to tell other people about that.
Okay. Any more questions for TJ?
Yes, because I just went to Louisiana for the first time this year, New Orleans.
Congratulations, because that's my favorite second home.
Great food, the Jazz Museum, French Quarters, everything. I love it. Going back next year. You were saying tying in a story. It reminds me of a bed and breakfast I went to in Rhode Island, and they had a mansion tours of these, not a mansion, but there was estate tours. And they give you a headphone, and each room had like a recording that you would plug into, and it would give you about a minute and a half of just what would go on in this particular, let's say, ballroom, and then what would go on in this room, the dining room, and things of that nature. And the tour was about $90 for like 3 of these estates, where they have the dumb waiters and everything served up. These were some of the early 1800s, I guess, entrepreneurs, the Vanderbilts, all of these people. And this was like their summer homes. And like you said, the story just makes you want to go back, or it gives you something, a part of history. So are you offering some type of tour or some type of, not excursion,
Oh, I
but
love it.
add to your certain properties?
Oh, I love it. I mean, I feel like you're hitting on what it is we're trying to get to and where we're trying to go, which is when you start off, I remember this place because of this, what they did. That's what we're trying to get people to do. I remember this place because of this. Now, how are we morphing that into more of, you know, what you're talking about? Let's talk about the Raven. So our first unique estate, which we have another one building right now from a baby, from a bottom up. We have another little unique estate we're building. And that unit had a story written about it. It even gives that the whole house a gender, that the house is a female. So it's a moody female, 1920s. And we tell that story, and the way we tell it is in the escape room scenario. So the story translated to an escape room scenario. The guests come in and they take their phones, and there's a QR code. And again, it's under construction because we decided to move to video. There's a QR code that they swipe as soon as they're ready. It's at the desk. They swipe it, and the first thing that comes up is a written story that tells them this is the scenario that you're in, and this is how you have to free this and this and that. I don't want to give it a story because it's something pretty unique to that tiny house, but it tells them, and every time that they look at it, the barcode, it gives them a clue, and they have to figure out the clue that brings them back to the space. So the clue takes them somewhere into the tiny house that they have to figure out, what is it talking about? A candlestick. I had to look at candlesticks. They pick up a candlestick, and there's the next barcode for the next clue, and so they figure it out. And we're trying to put into that more of a theatrics with the voices, you know, the 1920s based voices, and also have them, you know, streaming on YouTube and things like that. Those are the things that we're trying to do into these particular units. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's exactly where we're going.
Okay. Yeah, my brain was running just now like a kiosk, speakers. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Nice.
I
Look,
love
guys,
it.
I'm going to end the meetup. Doesn't mean that we have an after party. DJ, you can stay as long as you want to answer questions all you want, but
Yeah.
I'm going to end this for the meetup part of it. So I just want to
For
say
the
thank you.
recording.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. So I want to say thank you again to Tamara Jones, my first repeat guest speaker. And next week is another repeat guest speaker.
Nicole,
In the
that's my
grass.
buddy.
So yeah, so I'm excited. This whole
Yeah.
month is all women guest speakers. We've had this many times on this meetup, so I'm very, very excited to have the women on here talk about their experience in real estate and their success stories. So please come next week. We'll see you guys next week. God bless you.
All right.